bond markets. But let's put the spotlight on the larger economy. Joining me now is DK Joshi, Chief Economist at Crisil. Now, Crisil has come up with an interesting report. Mr. Joshi, thanks so much for joining us, firstly. You've come up with an interesting report on the structural shift which has been seen over the last couple of years as far as rural demand is concerned. But what is stark is the fact that you're saying that even over there, the potential of the rural growth is at risk because of the infrastructure bottleneck. So what is the key takeaway from all the studies that you've done here?
Well, I think we've done a number of studies in rural consumption. I think the first study, which was released earlier, pointed out that rural consumption for the first time in 25 years was growing faster than urban consumption. So that's something which we hadn't seen earlier. In this report, we dig down a bit deep and look at what's happening at the state level. What we find is that the states which have similar level of discretionary spending per household, they have different penetration of durable goods. For instance, the ownership of electric fans is much higher in Gujarat than in Uttar Pradesh, simply because the electricity penetration is much higher in Gujarat. So whether it is electricity or it is rural roads, I think these things make rural consumption possible. The necessary condition is obviously income, but that's not the sufficient condition. So I think a combination of both income as well as rural infrastructure makes rural consumption possible. And that's exactly what we are pointing out in this study, that the lost demand in many states is quite significant simply because they have the income, but they don't have the infrastructure to, for instance, if the electricity penetration in Bihar is very low, only 12% of the households are connected to electricity, so that itself limits the penetration of television sets.
Okay,
so
Mr. Joshi,
they have the capability to buy.
Yeah, Mr. Joshi, how bad could things get from here? Because you've basically seen 2 years when a lot of the infrastructure push has been either slowed down considerably or delayed. Do you think we could see a fall in consumption going forward because there is a lag?
Well, if the infrastructure doesn't pick up, I think going ahead, obviously I think that will have adverse implications for rural consumption. I think particularly in the states where infrastructure is lacking, I mean particularly Bihar, Odisha, Uttar Pradesh, I think these are the states which require infrastructure to improve very significantly. I think if there is slack in infrastructure, it will also eventually reflect in consumption of many items, which includes two-wheelers, cars, and also television sets. And I think in any case, I think if you look at this particular year, we have seen, we should see some slowdown in rural consumption from the past because one, agriculture hasn't done well, so farm incomes would not be that great as they were earlier. And second, I think more important is that the growth itself in the economy has come down. So the transfer of income from urban to rural areas would also be lower. So rural consumption should slow down going ahead. The overall consumption has slowed down to a 10-year low of 4%. I mean, that's what the government data shows. So I think a bit of softening of rural demand here.
Right, Mr. Joshi, but my question to you is that, I have to ask you a macro question right now. You've seen a lot of ruckus in Parliament because of the issue of FDI and retail. Now, if disruptions were to continue and the government would take a step back on the reform agenda, because a lot is predicated on this, also what the RBI does next. How much of a setback do you see this as being for the economy? Because everybody agrees that there is a short window within which the government can retrieve the situation right now.
Well, I think the winter session of the Parliament is very critical because if you take yourself 2-3 months back, I think things were pretty bad, and when the government announced a lot of reform measures and also took bold steps of raising diesel prices, etc., I think that changed the mood, lifted the mood suddenly, and I think we saw capital inflows come in, we saw rupee appreciating, and I think now what happened, so there is a certain hope that I think some of the bills which are hanging, I think they will get passed. So I think it will be a big setback if that doesn't happen. And as far as the central bank is concerned, my feeling is that with the growth coming off now, the inflation pressure is also beginning to ease, particularly core inflation, the non-food manufacturing inflation, which has consistently come down in the last 3 months. So I think clearly the pricing power is taking some hit there. So we are moving towards a situation where the central bank will cut rates. But yeah, if we see more action on the fiscal front, then we could see more durable rate cuts from the central bank going ahead.
Right, Mr. Joshi, we'll leave it over there. Thanks so much for joining us. That's DK Joshi from Crisil. With that, that's a wrap on Lunch Money. Thank you so much for joining us.